Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to inspire and motivate people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. We will chat with highly successful people from all walks of life and discuss what motivates and drives them to successfully attack life head on and never give up.
Welcome to episode number 91 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Wirth, and today's theme of the day is enthusiasm. Our quote of the day comes to us from Henry Ford. You can do anything if you have enthusiasm. It is an honor to bring you today's episode. Our guest is a gentleman by the name of Ed Decosta. Ed is a very successful individual that provides great value on today's show. He defines success as overcoming obstacles, and I couldn't agree more. I've had the privilege of knowing Ed since 2011, and I believe you will really enjoy today's episode. Ed, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Great to be with you, Chris. Good morning.
Good morning. First question we ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
Yes, sir. I was raised by a bunch of people that bring it every day, and it's the only way I know how to be. So I'm delighted to be here with you and an audience full of people that want to bring it every day too.
Awesome. It's the only way to be. So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up. And I was curious, Ed, if you had either a story about perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that really tested you, but you kept on going and didn't give up.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think for most of us, Chris, when we look at our lives in a certain mindset, you can see challenges, obstacles, times where it was particularly challenging in some way for us, and where we had an opportunity to make a choice on how to respond. It's, the old cliche, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do about what happens to you. And as we talked during our prep for this episode, Chris, there are two in particular that as I look back on them, one, I don't have to look back very far. It really did try me, but I'm very grateful for that no quit mindset. Really am. So the first one happened about 15 years ago. I'm living in Boston, which is where I'm from, with my wife and 3 kids. And my wife, who I met, she grew up in West Virginia, and I met her in college 35 years ago. We've been married 31 years. But her dad had a stroke, and she desperately wanted to live near her parents. Very understandable. But I was in a multiple 6-figure job, in a career for a factory automation company. And I traveled all over the world, and I loved it. And I was, in the city that I grew up in that I love. I'm passionate about the sports teams, and my family's there and all of that. And yet the woman I love, Chris, wanted to move to a place that had fewer people in the state than lived in the city I lived in. And it was a challenge for me, but I love her very much, and I'm going to live where she wants to live. And I'm not ashamed of that in any way. And so it took a lot of courage for me to go into my boss, who I have a great relationship even now, 15 years later. I'm still friends with the man, that I resigned. And I didn't have a company, but I just knew that I was going to be able to do it. I'd been in sales and marketing for most of my professional career. I'm originally an engineer, but I just knew that I was going to somehow find a way, even if it was in a place that didn't have as many people. And so we did that, and we moved, and it was the best thing I could ever do. I mean, if you're a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law, the best thing you could ever do is to bring to your in-laws their son or daughter and, oh, by the way, their grandchildren. And so, you talk about, becoming a hero to your father-in-law and your mother-in-law. I certainly did that. And I've just hustled. I just hustled like nobody's business to build my business. I'm now making 4 times what I made in my corporate life, my best year, and I was doing well then. So it has really worked out. And the other, I don't have to look very far, but in the spring, I lost my mom to cancer, and it was a very trying time for our family. I became a grandfather. Literally within 5 days of losing my mom. So talk about an emotional whirlwind, Chris. And my wife, Linda, she started seeing changes in my behavior, and it was getting progressively more pronounced. I was having headaches. I was tired. I just wasn't my old self. And I was, like many men do, foolishly, I was telling her she was crazy. You're nuts. I'm fine. I'm fine. Well, I wasn't fine. And she finally confronted me with one of my sons, who happens to be a bodybuilder, and, could break me like a twig if he wanted to, and he wouldn't. But he helped his mother get me into the car, not physically, didn't have to hurt me, but, just Dad, get in the car. We're going to the hospital. And I was like, well, who are we going to visit in the hospital? Like, no, Dad, you need to get checked out. And I had a brain tumor. I had a large brain tumor the size of a grapefruit in my head that was pressing on my frontal lobe. And I'm not kidding. I was totally in shock. Couldn't believe it. It explained away so many things to people who knew me, Chris, because I had changed. I wasn't being responsive to people on email, on text, and like I normally was. I'm a very organized guy normally. My office was a mess compared to what it normally looked like. And it just explained so many things. And I'm very grateful and thankful that it wasn't cancer. It was a very large tumor, so it was impacting me significantly, but it wasn't consuming my brain. So for 4 months, the doctor literally told me I had to take a 4-month hiatus from my business. Any entrepreneur knows that is devastating to a business. But, you're talking about your life. You're talking about recovering, and it's your brain. It's not your ankle. Having a bad ankle is one thing. Having a bad brain changes your life. You can't do what I do for a living, speak, coach, train, without your brain, right? There's a million jokes there, but forgive me, I won't tell them. A lot of my friends are like, Ed, this one time in your life, having a small brain is coming help, useful for you. There was room for the tumor, but there wasn't. It was they're teased. That's how you know a guy's your friend, right? He's totally dissing you when you're down. But I'm recovered. I'm back on the John Maxwell team faculty, which I had to take a hiatus from. Got my coaching clients back. I've got several speaking engagements I've already done. And again, I'm extremely grateful that I did not have cancer. I have worked hard. I did not quit. I absolutely did not quit. But representing it is only because of the willpower of Ed Decosta. It's doing an injustice to my faith. It would do an injustice to the neurosurgeon, who was a genius and is a genius, just an amazing guy. You think about people who open up other people's heads, and I can't even think about it without getting chills. Okay, thank God I was under anesthesia. I was not conscious during the whole 10-hour surgery. So those are just a couple of no quit episodes in my life, and I'm sure, like most people, there are others.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you sharing those two with us, and secondly, I'm glad you are back and at it, and I think it's a testament not only to your wife, to your family, to your son, but also to you, because we all get dealt with different things, and we all get knocked down, and the question is, do you stay down or do you have enough fight in you? And you've obviously done that and taken it to a new level, so I truly appreciate that. And you touched on something which I just wanted to mention is the reason why I do No Quit Living and why I have my professional speaking, coaching, and training career as well is because of a lot of my past playing and coaching college basketball, but also the fact that I wanted to improve myself. And we actually connected at the first ever John Maxwell
that is right
certification program many years ago. So I appreciate the fact that you are here on the show many years later. And I wanted to ask you an interesting question, Ed, is how do you personally define success?
Terrific. Just quick question, Chris. That's the one we went to John's house, right?
Yep, that's true.
Yeah. So, to talk about access to greatness, John is a man just like you and I. He's human and he's not perfect, but he's pretty close as far as I'm concerned. And to go into his house and meet his wife and to see his literal house, it was just an amazing thing. If
I could just interject one thing, please, I want to share with our listeners is when we were in John's house, I was part of a very small group that got to go to John's house, and I was actually in his office with, I believe, probably 8 or 9 other members of our team, and he was sitting at his chair, and I was actually sitting at his desk, and he said, "Chris, open up the bottom drawer," which I did, and he was actually working on one of his books, and it was just amazing because he had one of those 4-color Bic pens.
Exactly.
And that's
I'm
how he
holding
did
one
it.
right now.
And not only did I get to see inside kind of what goes on in a book, but more importantly, see inside John's mind. But then for me, I'm a voracious reader, and not that I wasn't interested in John's book. I was enamored by it, but then I just found myself turning around to his bookshelf, and in my mind I was going through and I said, I've read that. And then it was like, need to read that. So it was just an awesome experience. But to go back to the question is, how do you define success?
Sure. Wow. Again, Chris, you and I are like-minded guys for sure, and we could talk forever. I'm so glad to hear what you just said, because I've had many of those moments with John to be able to see where a guy creates it. I mean, we know Ernest Hemingway sat in a chair and wrote, Old Man and the Sea. Charles Dickens sat in a chair, William Shakespeare. And so when you see the living guy in his actual room, and it's not some historical representation of, this is where Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. Like, okay, that's awesome, but I'm in the room with the guy who's still alive, and he's sitting right here. And he's opening a drawer and showing me the pen he uses. It's just an uncanny access that most people never get. So all of that to get to, what is the answer to the question, what is success? It's not about success. It's about significance. It's about making a difference in the lives of other people. It's when, heaven forbid, it happens soon, but when you are on your proverbial deathbed, and forgive me if some of your listeners, Chris, think this is kind of sappy, because I'm not a sappy guy. I grew up in Southie. I grew up in South Boston, Massachusetts. I'm not this esoteric thinker and soft-spoken guy. I clearly am not. But the truth is, when you reach the end of your life, you're either going to be full of regret or full of satisfaction of what you did. And it's going to be precisely to the point of your podcast, my friend. You're not going to look at necessarily the happy times. Of course, you're going to look at those too. And playing with my grandson, Vincent, it's such a joy to me. But there's no challenge to that. I mean, it's fun for a grandpa to get on the ground and play with his grandson. But it's those moments where you were challenged, and what did you do when you were faced with a challenge? And I think success, and again, I can't remember who said it. Maybe it was John Maxwell, that, success is going from one failure to another without the loss of enthusiasm. Okay? Because it's not really a failure, of course, if you don't quit. It is a failure if you do quit. But so for me, success is, overcoming the obstacle that's right in front of me. Even though I know there may be 100 more or 1,000 more to go in my life. But, if you walk the Appalachian Trail, okay, guess what? You're climbing a mountain today, but you're not climbing all of them today. So just climb the mountain you're on, get your rest, get your nutrition, get your hydration, get your campsite made. Forgive the use of metaphors here, but it's the only way I know how to speak. And then, we'll handle tomorrow's mountain tomorrow. Okay. And worrying about it right now is not going to do you a darn bit of good anyway. So just focus on the one that you're on. And that's success to me.
No, I appreciate that. And I think one of the best parts about doing this show has been able to connect with other like-minded people from all different walks of life. And that question about success is one of my favorite questions. And the reason being is because not a single person so far has ever said it's just money or it's getting to this amount of. Now, don't get me wrong, success, you definitely need some money in life to do some things, but some of the best answers have been some of the ones that have been given about leaving significance or legacy or paying it forward. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I wanted to ask you, if you had to define yourself in one word, what would that word be?
Enthusiastic. I have one of two opinions on just about every subject. Okay. Most subjects, I have no opinion, none. I have no use for it. Okay. And I'm not going to spend any time creating an opinion on something that's not meaningful to me. And on the small percentage of things, Chris, that I do care about, I have a strong opinion. And I am passionate about it. And again, I'm not pretending I'm the only guy. Like you found the enthusiastic guy on the planet. No, there are billions of enthusiastic people. But I hear that time and time again in all areas. In my high school soccer team, my friends from childhood, the people who worked for me when I was in my corporate days, that I was inspiring and encouraging to them, not because of what I said. More often than not, it was because of how I said it, that they caught, that again, it's a cliche, but, is your attitude worth catching? Because attitudes are contagious. And I've just always been an enthusiastic guy. You want to talk about the Red Sox and the Patriots, and I know some of your listeners are groaning right now, but, I'm enthusiastic about those things, even though it's just entertainment. I don't know Tom Brady. I'm not on the Red Sox team. It's just a company playing a sport. I get that. But if you're going to be interested in something, you might as well be enthusiastic about it. That's the way I look at it.
I couldn't agree more. If you're going to do anything in life, there's no way to do it other than 100%. So I appreciate that. And I maybe shouldn't share this with you, but I'm a diehard Giants fan, so I'm sorry about a couple Super Bowls we took from you.
Hey, you know what? People want to say, that Peyton Manning is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He might be the third best quarterback in his family, okay? Because his little brother Eli beat the Patriots twice, and nobody else has beaten them twice. The Bears beat them in '86, and Brett Favre beat them with the Packers. But only one guy's, 2 for 2 against Belichick and Brady, and that's Eli Manning and the Giants.
Unfortunately, I'll have to live vicariously because it's been a tough season for us. So I will avoid any more comments because I might start to cry on my own show.
Okay. Yeah, good for you.
So one of the topics we often discuss is personal development, and we're always trying to add value to our listeners. So I was curious if you've read anything recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Intentional Living by John Maxwell. Again, sounds self-serving, but I am not John Maxwell. I just know him. It's a phenomenal book, and the title describes what it is. It's all about living with purpose and living with intentionality, not just in the macro kind of generic sense, but in a daily sense, that you really set intentions every day, every week, every month. And it sounds so self-evident, Chris, but people don't do it. I know this for a fact. I am an executive coach. I work with some high achievers, great financial success, great outward trappings of success. Yet, many times when you talk to them about how they run their daily lives, it's chaos. It's chaos. If you have time for a quick story, you'll very much appreciate that. Appreciate this. So I live in Morgantown, West Virginia. It's the home of West Virginia University. And a lot of great players, come through, football players, including some that went to the NFL. So when my son Brian was probably, 13 or 14 years old, he had some friends over, some boys come over to the house, and they're eating. And I don't know all the boys. I think one of them's name is Justin, if I'm not mistaken. My son Brian was having dinner with all of us, and he said, "Dad, you played high school sports, right?" I said, "Yeah, I did. I wrestled. I played soccer. I played hockey and baseball." And he said, "Did you ever win any championships?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, we didn't win the state, but we won our league my senior year. Yeah, so yeah, I've won a championship." And he says, Justin's dad, this is a boy sitting at our dinner table. My son points to him and said, "Justin's dad was MVP of the Super Bowl." What? I said, "Is your last name Hostetler?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, I didn't know that. Just, Jeff Hostetler was your dad." Wow. So yeah, your dad wins that one. I got nothing on the Super Bowl MVP, nothing. And of course he played for the Giants when he did that. So I thought you'd like that.
Definitely.
True story.
Now, did you get a chance to meet Jeff, talk to him at all?
Oh, I've met him several times. He was standing right next to me at a children's recital at a middle school, and our daughter, our 21-year-old daughter, inherited his daughter's cheerleading uniform because a bunch of the clothing had the daughter's name. And I'm thinking, okay, there's my connection to greatness right there. My daughter cheered in the same uniform as Jeff Hostetler's daughter. But I stood next to him, and I'll never forget. I looked next to him, and I thought, wow, that guy standing next to me looks just like Jeff Hostetler. And I looked, oh, I know why. That is Jeff Hostetler. And he's just as regular and unassuming a guy, very charitable, very humble. He's a really, really cool guy. Again, I'm not friends with him. I don't know him really that much at all.
Well, I like that story extra because of the fact that he was a Super Bowl winning quarterback for the New York Giants.
You talk about no quit. You talk about, I'm not going to tell his story. We don't have time, but he was told a million times. I've heard just the legend there. We live 2 miles from each other, and he's around, he's visible. But, if not for Phil Simms getting injured, right, most people have never heard of Jeff Hostetler, if not for the injury from another person. So that whole life principle of being prepared for the moment, when your ship comes in, you better be ready to get on the boat, okay? Because the time to get ready is not when the ship comes in. You got to be ready before the ship comes in. And again, I'm guessing people who listen to the No Quit podcast are of this mindset, but so many people, they get these opportunities to do things and they're not ready. When one of my best friends said you have an opportunity to talk to John Maxwell. Well, I was anxious, to be fair and honest, but I was ready. I knew what I knew. I knew that I was a great coach. I knew that I could teach selling because I teach at a university. I teach at WVU in the College of Business. I knew that I had what it took to add value to John's tribe. I just didn't want to walk in there like I thought I was his peer because, at the time I'd written 0 books. I've now written 2, but he's written over 100 books. So, who am I to him? Nothing. So I didn't want to go in cocky, but I didn't want to go in, like I was, not of value to him.
No, and I appreciate you sharing that. And it's an interesting concept. And having coached and played college basketball, one of the terms that we talk about, and I also coached high school basketball, is the term next man up. And not that you ever want a teammate
right.
or a fellow employee to get hurt or injured or get fired or let go. But the reality is in life, it happens. And one of the things we talked about is next man up and next play. And, I think that's something that literally can translate into all aspects of life is, you make the next
100%.
play, you make the next phone call, you make the next. And, I think a lot of times people look at what happened and what could have happened as opposed to your point of being prepared. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. One other thing, and again, you and I could probably go on like this for hours, but who is Jimmy Garoppolo? Most people didn't know who this man was a year ago or a year and 2 years ago. Didn't know. He was the backup quarterback for the New England Patriots. Tom Brady got suspended. Whether he should have or shouldn't have is not the point, but he got suspended. And Jimmy Garoppolo stepped up and played wonderfully. He's now the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. He's going to become a free agent, and he's going to become a bazillionaire. Why? Because next man up, when his number was called, he didn't say, wait, Coach Belichick, let me go read the playbook now, okay? Because I didn't think I was ever going to get in a game. No, that's not what he said. He trotted out on the field and called the next play. And he played wonderfully because he was ready for that next man up call, that next play. And again, it's a metaphor, right? Life is not a football game, but the principles are, as you know, they're identical.
No, there's so much overlap. So I wanted to ask you a different question. If you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of Ed, only one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
Yeah, it'd probably be more reassuring than advice. I've answered this question before, and I remember thinking to myself, well, I'd tell him to slow down. Smell the coffee, smell the roses, whatever the cliche is. Take some time to really reflect on things. But I don't know. I don't know what the 20-year-old Ed would say if I told him that. He'd probably not listen to me and walk away. Okay. So I'd tell him it's all going to work out. Do the best you can. Give it every day. And I know this sounds like an Army commercial, right? Be the best you can be and don't sweat it, right? It's not what happens to you, because life's going to throw you some twists and some turns. Life's going to really knock you on your butt. But I'm here to tell you, I am you from your future. I know that's blowing your mind right now, but I am, okay? And you're going to be fine. And I'm 55 years old right now, so that would be 35 years into the future. And if the 85-year-old Ed could walk in here right now, 30 years from my future, I would be really happy because, oh, wow, I'm going to live 30 more years, right? That's number one. And I bet you he would tell me the same thing. He'd look at me as a young guy now, all right, and say the same thing. So that whole projecting, look back and project forward, that exercise is really, really powerful. And I challenge all of your listeners to really spend some time thinking about that. What would you say to a younger version of you? And what, on the flip side, what do you think an older version of you would say to you right now?
That's a great twist on it. I might have to adapt that for a future episode, so I'll have to give you some copyright for that.
In fact, I'm doubling my fee right now.
All right, never mind. I'm not going to do it. So if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh, my goodness. Well, my parents are both deceased. I would, yeah, any other name would be a lie. I would want to sit with my parents. But aside from that, and again, it may nauseate some people, Ted Williams, the greatest hitter of all time, played for the Red Sox before I was born. Bobby Orr was one of my childhood heroes. John F. Kennedy, a Boston guy who became the president. Again, we now know that he wasn't a perfect man either. But talk about a leader, talk about a man who catalyzed a country. My fellow Americans, we will put a man on Earth, on the moon, and bring him safely back to Earth. And, you talk about leadership. I mean, there's a million of them, but those are the ones that just come to my mind.
No, I appreciate those. That would be quite some interesting meals, and I think you might be a Boston fan just from some of your answers.
You're picking up on that, Chris?
Yeah, I think I just got that. Now, full and fair disclosure.
Really worked wonders for you.
Full and fair disclosure. You did say that Ted Williams is the greatest hitter of all time. It's important to note that you have never seen me hit a baseball, Ed.
That is a fact. I have never seen you hit a baseball. You have a minute for another quick story?
Of course.
So this little boy gets a baseball bat and a ball for his birthday. And he's so excited because he loves baseball, but he hasn't played yet. Okay. And his dad gets him the ball, and the boy goes out in the backyard and he throws the ball up in the air and he swings at it and he misses. And he says, I'm the greatest hitter of all time. Picks the ball back up, throws the ball in the air. As it comes down, he swings and misses again. And he says, I am the greatest hitter of all time. Throws the ball in the air, swings, misses it again by a lot. His dad comes out and says, son, I can see you're frustrated. The little boy looks up at his dad and says, no, Dad, I just figured out I'm the greatest pitcher of all time.
That's no quit behind, and it's also just keep going. No, I appreciate that,
man. Exactly.
So we're going to change lanes here, what I call the hot seat questions. So all we would like to ask you is just spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Are you sure? You can mute? Go ahead.
We can mute and edit, so don't worry, we're good.
Terrific. All right.
Awesome. All right. If you only had one last meal, what would you choose for your last meal?
Eggplant parmesan.
Favorite all-time sport?
Soccer.
Now, this might be tough for you. all-time favorite team?
Boston Red Sox.
Do you have a favorite movie?
Good Will Hunting, made in my hometown.
Great movie. Your favorite all-time book?
7 Habits of Highly Effective People, changed my life.
Favorite singer or band?
James Taylor, by far. Boston guy, even though he moved to North Carolina.
And if you were in a foxhole and you could only pick one person to have your back, who would it be?
My brother Jimmy.
Awesome. So I wanted to ask you, Ed, before we let you go, if there's anything exciting that you're working on that you'd like to tell or share with our listeners.
Yeah, I've always got like 10 plates spinning, and I wouldn't have it any other way. We're excited about the future of the John Maxwell team, obviously, and that I'm not driving the bus on that. John Maxwell is Gladys Knight, and I am one of the pips. So, if he says turn left and snap, I turn left and snap. I'm working on another book, extracting, like many have heard, life lessons from The Godfather, the book by Mario Puzo, and also the movies, even the horrible third movie by Francis Ford Coppola. Just The Godfather. Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Never tell anybody outside the family what you're thinking again. So I'm working on another book, and I'm very excited about my Ascend Coaches toolkit. Without sounding blatantly commercial, you asked the question. I'm just giving you an honest answer. I've got a toolkit for coaches to help them run mastermind groups and attract business to their practice. So I'm excited about that.
Well, you definitely have a lot of plate spinning. You said 10. That's probably about 15 or 20 when you have all the underlinings. And definitely. I appreciate you sharing that. And wanted to ask if you have any parting words or advice you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Yeah. It's a quote from St. Augustine, right? Conquer yourself and the world lies at your feet. Conquer yourself and the world lies at your feet. So start with you. Start with you, reflect, pray if you pray, meditate if you don't pray, become better in all seriousness. Don't point the finger. Point the finger at yourself, not to beat yourself up, but to really have this mindset that says, not just I'm not quitting, which is such a powerful and important message, but that I'm going to strive. Right? The only way to not fail, to guarantee you don't fail, is to not do anything. Because therefore you will not fail. You won't win either. Okay? You won't accomplish anything. So you must strive, but while striving, you will fail from time to time. You will get knocked on your backside, no doubt about it. Right? But that's where that no quit comes in. But don't be afraid of failure. So much so that you guarantee that you get through the life. And John Maxwell says it. Some people are dead. They just haven't made it official. They're still alive, but they're not alive, if you follow me.
No, I remember John saying that when we were down in Florida, and
he did.
He said it obviously a couple times since in books and things, but I really appreciate. So last question is, for our listeners that would like to connect or follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, eddecosta.com. I know that's not surprising to anyone. That's my name, Ed Decosta. Just Google me. There's probably a dozen or so other Ed Decostas in the country and the world, and they probably all hate my guts because I am the first 4 pages of Google search results on our name. My name is John Smith. I wouldn't own the name, but, because there's a lot of others. But just Google Ed Decosta. I've got a YouTube channel, Twitter feed. I got a weekly free called Get Edified video blog. You can sign up for that on my website, or you can watch it on YouTube whenever you want. People sign up. I don't spam them. I don't email you 27 times a day. You get basically 1 email a week with a video, and it's free. And I'm not upselling all the darn time, trying to get you to buy a program. I want you to buy a program, but not if you don't want to, or if it's doesn't serve where you are in this world today. Then I don't want you to.
That's awesome stuff, and we'll share that in the show notes. So, Ed, I just want to say a very special thank you. I truly appreciate not only your time. I know you're doing a lot of different things, but I appreciate you sharing what you did with us, and I look forward to connecting soon.
Chris, I very much enjoyed it. I've been a guest on a handful of podcasts. You're excellent at it. Great questions, and you've got your own story to it. You're adding value as well, and I've enjoyed it tremendously. So thank you, and I hope, again, the main point of our discussion was to benefit your listeners, and I truly hope that it does.
Thank you for listening to episode number 91. Ed Decosta is quite an individual that has overcome his fair share of challenges. The most recent was a grapefruit-sized tumor that was removed from his brain back in September of 2017. After a 4-month hiatus from his business, Ed is back at it and rocking his coaching, speaking, and training business. Ed also happens to be a member of the faculty for the John C. Maxwell team, which is how we initially met. Ed's positive approach towards life, his family, and helping others through his business is very inspiring. Ed mentioned the importance of significance, and he also touched upon 2 things that I think are very important. One question he asked was, what do you do when you are challenged? And in his closing comments, he stressed not being afraid of failure. So my question to our listeners today is this: what do you do when you fail? And what impact does failure have upon you? Thomas Edison has one of the best quotes of all time when it deals with failure. I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. So in closing today, I challenge our listeners to flip the switch on how you look at failure. Don't expect it or want it, but if and when it comes, realize that you are only one step closer to your greatness.
And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.